Hello, welcome. Today we would start with our series on expected questions. The focus today would be economics. Now we already have few of the questions from our friends here. So ETF we would be covering as we move forward in our lecture. Talking about priority sector lending norms, this is very important and has been in today's news itself. So what is basically priority sector lending norms? So when we say RBI is regulating the banks about the loans that should be given to certain priority sectors like agriculture or farmers, and all those would be included in the priority sector lending norms. So when we talk about that, recently what happened was this idea was started by M.V. Nair committee in 2011, and later on it was believed that the government should bring in changes to the committee recommendations that were given. So the present recommendation says if the bank has more than 20 branches across India, if it is a foreign bank having more than 20 branches in India, then it would have to provide loan to the small and the marginal farmers and the small and the medium sectors. However, if the bank branches are less than 20 in India, then the lending norms, the PSL, would be increased from 32% to 40%. For the Indian banks it's already 40%, but for the foreign banks it would be a hard hit because it would increase from 32% to 40%. That is a significant increase for these private sector banks, foreign banks. Now coming on to the first topic for today, that is the rising demonetization. Now demonetization has been a common reference since the last 2 years. The thing that's important for your prelims examination is, we say 99% of the money that was demonetized has been back to RBI, but what has not been included in this 99% is the old notes that are being held with district central cooperative banks. So this is very important, and this becomes an important section for your MCQs. Again, pre-demonetization and post-demonetization, there has been a shortfall of nearly 2 lakh crore rupees, and that's again important. So the new currency that has come is nearly 2 lakh crore short of the previous currency. The next is Rajiv Kumar Committee. Rajiv Kumar Committee has been established for creation of newer jobs in India, and when we are talking about creation of new jobs in India, the idea is to focus on labor intensive exports. Now India has most of its labor, nearly 80 to 90%, in the informal sector. Bringing them to a formal sector is the first challenge that we talk about under inclusive growth. Again, very important for your mains and answer writing section, what is inclusive growth and how we can work around that. So when we are talking about inclusive growth, we are focusing on labor intensive exports, and for this labor intensive exports, the Rajiv Kumar Committee basically focuses on two things. First is the low productivity, and the second is the low wages that are being given. So both of these become very important. Smart city we have covered separately in one of the lectures. For optional candidates, it's again very important topic. Recently you have 30 new cities which have come under the smart city, so those again become very important. And the two institutions that have been awarded for this are the World Bank and the Aegis Francis D Development Funds. So those two again become important. Labor sector, as we have already talked, how we have a major proportion in the informal sector, we are trying to bring it into the formal sector, and Niti Aayog has given the recommendations along with the IDFC Institute. And the main issues the labor is facing in India is basically the surplus labor, then you have less skilled labor, low level of technological development, large base of informal sector that is present, more diversification that is seen, and the lack of labor reforms and no proper coordination between the trade unions or the labor unions, we should say. The next is ease of doing business. Similar to the World Bank's ease of doing business, Niti Aayog has recommended a ease of doing business for India as well. Now here when we talk about the ease of doing business report, it has incorporated nearly 3,500 manufacturing firms from India, and we are assessing three important things. First is the level of delays in the approval process. The second is the increasing competitive cooperative federalism, and the third is high growth rate. So all three aspects should be included under the ease of doing business that has been given by the Government of India. Now Fahad has a question regarding the rearrangement of the topics for the various classes that we have covered. So those rearranged topics are available at Doorstep Tutor. So you can go there and see all the videos in sequence. The next is the status of Indian economy. Now, India among the 190 nations rank 130, that is far behind, and we aim to increase this ranking. So what we have to focus on is the manufacturing sector and the service sector. Currently, the manufacturing sector and the construction sector has showed a slump or a decline in the levels, and the second report or the second volume of the economic survey has also showed in deflationary impulses. So both of those have been some of the major factors that have been affecting the Indian economy. Now besides this, there are certain other factors that we are familiar with which have been affecting the economy since the last 1.5 years. So those are demonetization, GST, then you have low level of technological development, more diversification that has come up between the consumption and the investment patterns, and the vulnerability of rupee. So those are some of the key things that need to be addressed. When it comes to the prices of petroleum and diesel in the market, from 2014 to 2016, we have seen there have been 9 episodes where we have increased the excise duty on petroleum and diesel. Later on, since 2017, we have come up with a dynamic daily pricing schedule which talks about the daily changes in the price of petroleum and diesel. The very important committee that we would be discussing today is B.N. Sri Krishna committee, the second important committee after the Rajiv Kumar committee panel that we have talked about. Now under this committee, it has talked about bilateral investments and resolution of disputes between the various nations. So dispute resolution between the various countries become important. For this, what have been proposed is, you can bring in external lawyers if you want for a BIT resolution. You can also create a inter-council ministry for resolution of the disputes and appoint new councillors for the same. The next is the new financial resolution regime. Now this is again very important. You had already, someone has asked a question on FSSA and FSA. So those along with the Financial and Resolution Deposit Insurance Bill 2017 become very important. This bill basically talks about resolving the bankruptcies by the various financial institutions or the financial firms. Now we have already talked about the banking reforms. That's mainly the Indradhanush plan that has come up, how government is putting in money into the banking sector to make sure that banks thrive and there is no bank failure as that happened in United States few years back. So to take into account, you have the Financial and the Resolution Deposit Insurance Bill that was released, along with to work on the stress test. You have two important bills that we have already talked about, that is the Financial Sector Assessment, that is FSA, and FSSA, that is the Financial System Stability Assessment. So we will be covering that in detail in a separate lecture. It's very important for your upcoming examination. Now, how can you resolve the bankruptcy? So, first of all, you have to work around the health of a financial institution. You have to work around the resolution tools that could be taken into consideration, and what could be the things that could be considered to handle a stressful or a situation of distress for the banks. The next is, a bullet train has been is being proposed, and that has been with the collaboration of Japan and India. The first is proposed between Ahmedabad and Mumbai. Now this agreement was first signed in 2015. In between there was a period of slump where there was the relations between India and India and Japan fluctuated, and later on this project started again. Now you have the High Speed Rail Corporation that has been set up, and we plan to have this bullet trains by 2022. The next is the crackdown on the shell companies. Now, after the demonetization, there was a scenario where a lot of money was put into by creating fake bank accounts in the name of fake companies, and this came into light after the GST was released, and after the GST was imposed, you had numerous shell companies that were revealed, and there was basically a big crackdown on these companies. This has been discussed in the Companies Act of 2013. Now, the idea was to fight against the black money, to bring in more transparency into the system, and to bring in more authentic registrations for the company. So, what are the problems that have been associated with the shell companies? First is hiding the money, hiding the assets, not paying the proper amount of taxes, and demonetization further accentuated the creation of shell companies during that time. The next is SEBI, which is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, has talked about new rules to enhance the market efficiency. Now, some of the important things that have been talked about are two. First is the art, that is accountable, responsible and transparent government, the three fundamental pillars of governance that we talk about, and the next is improving the market efficiency. So, those two things have been taken into account by SBI, and these new rules that have been coming up under SBI are focusing basically on the experience of the promoters and focusing on developing a responsible government. The next is we have witnessed a rise in the production of pulses. However, despite of the rise in the production of pulses, we are still importing a lot from the foreign countries. So, that is something we need to address under here. We have also talked about on one side for increasing the farmers' income by 2022, and when we are talking about that on one side, on the other side, even with increase in the pulse production, we have fall in the pulse price that has been registered. So, that needs to be addressed. Again, I have a question here from Fahad who asked about the missing chapter 14. So, that would be covered very shortly. Stay tuned for that. Now, next here is the next topic that we would be covering is the contingency fund, and RBI is basically moving on to create a contingency fund. Very important thing to keep into mind, there are two important funds. The first is the contingency fund and the next is the consolidated fund of India. To make it clear here itself, contingency fund has been established under article 267(1). However, consolidated fund of India has come up under article 266. Now, the basic difference here is the consolidated fund of India talks about taxation and the funds that have been collected through taxation. Contingency fund talks about all the extra money that has come up with RBI to be put up into a reserve amount, and in times of economic emergency or unforeseen circumstances, this money from the contingency fund can be derived of. So, right now we are talking about contingency fund, and RBI is setting forward to create a contingency fund worth nearly 13,140 crores, and the idea would be, as I said, in case of financial disruption, this contingency amount could be used by RBI, and RBI could put in more money for recapitalization of the banks if required. The next is, we'll talk about the consolidated fund of India in a while when we'll be talking about the cess and the taxation. Now, talking about the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. Since 1922, we have seen a highest increase in the income inequalities that have been registered in India. Now, on what parameters are these income inequalities measured? So, Gini coefficient is one that talks about or measures the income inequality. If we say Gini coefficient is 0, that means there is income inequality that exists, and 1 means an extreme inequality that exists. So, with the help of Gini coefficient, we measure the income inequalities that are prevalent into the society. Now, some of the steps that have been taken to reduce the income inequalities talks about a progressive taxation system. That means people with lesser income should be taxed less and people with more income should be taxed more, and that's what we have is a progressive taxation system. So, tax slab increases, and with an income of, let's say, 50 lakh to 1 crore, you have a surcharge of 10%, above 1 crore you have a surcharge of 15%. So, that talks about taxation along with the surcharge that increases with every hierarchy or with every tax slab. Again, providing equal opportunities to all, diversifying the income sources are some of the steps that could be taken to reduce the income inequalities. The next important thing that is the inclusive growth that we have already talked about, how moving from an informal sector to a formal sector is important. The next is cess. Now here there are three important terms that you need to understand. These are cess, surcharge and tax. So tax is basically, the taxes could be direct or indirect. Direct is something that is taken directly to the, that is paid directly to the government. For example, you have the income tax, so that's paid directly to the government. On the other hand, you have indirect taxes. So indirect taxes would be GST. Now, besides taxation, you have cess and surcharge. What is the difference between cess and surcharge is very, very important. Cess, I can simply say, is a tax on tax. So when I say tax on tax, let's say I am paying 30% as income tax. Now on this income tax, you have 3% educational cess. That means 3% of 30%, that would make 0.9. So in net, you would be paying 30.9% of income tax. However, let's say if someone has an income above 50 lakhs, what would happen is that person would be paying 30% tax and a 10% surcharge, that would be 3%, so net would become 33%. So that makes the surcharge. So surcharge, I can simply say, is an additional tax that is being incurred. Now, cess is important to understand because it's only for a specific purpose. As soon as the project is implemented, the purpose is fulfilled, this cess is removed or discontinued. That is not so with the case of surcharge. For cess, you can discontinue it. Let's say you have numerous cess. You have Swachh Bharat cess, Krishi Kalyan cess, education cess, higher education cess. Then we have talked about the goods, the GST compensation tax cess. So all these cess, once the objective is being fulfilled, they would be removed, but that is not the case with the surcharge. So the recent cess is the GST compensation cess. We have already discussed GST in one of the lectures in elaboration. So GST is important, and then the recent cess that has come up is again important. The next is linking of Aadhaar to driving license. So far we have talked about linking Aadhaar to the bank accounts, and now we are moving on to driving license. The idea is it would remove the menace of multiple licenses being issued in the name of same person. So to check that, you have the idea that is being proposed to link Aadhaar to the driving numbers. The next is the current account deficit. Now for India, the current account deficit has been widening. Now India's current account deficit, when we say it's widening, what are the causes for it? First is there has been fall in the export of services. There has been increase in the import of the gold in the last year. We are having more expenditure on government schemes. Demonetization has further accentuated it. The next is TASE. Now TASE is a Google app, that is a UPI based app which is built by the NPCI, the National Payment Corporation of India. The unique thing about this TASE is that this TASE would not require the details of bank account to the person in whose bank account you are planning to deposit the money, and therefore it would be thoroughly UPI based, and that would be one of the benefits this application would have over the other UPI methods that are into existence or the other digital methods that are into existence. This would also be protected by a Google PIN and is basically an application by Google. NRIs are not allowed to register for this TASE right now. The next is a $5 billion convention center project has been released in India. This would be the Asia's biggest project completed by 2021, and it would be a kind of exhibition cum convention center that would be built in India, and once built it would bring in more foreign exchange because more foreign functions or conferences could be organized here. So that's again important. The next is Asia Pacific Energy Research Center. Now this has been established in Tokyo. The idea is to bring in good relations with energy outlook and market development. Japan is one of the world's largest importer, and India is the 4th largest importer of LNG. So that has been taken into account while talking about this. The next is the Pacific Rim countries. There are 21 Pacific Rim countries which are part of the APEC, that is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It talks about free trade through the Asia Pacific region. It is headquartered in Singapore, and it includes 3 observations, that is basically 3 observers: ASEAN, Pacific Island Forum and Pacific Economic Cooperation Council. The next is we are set to build a National Infrastructure Investment Fund, and Abu Dhabi Investment Authority would be the first to invest in it with an investment of nearly 1 billion that would be given. Government would own nearly 49% of the stake under this. So that's again important. The next important thing is we are signing up a free trade pact with Mauritius. This was suspended in 2013 due to the double tax avoidance agreement and the disagreements with Mauritius government. This has again come into existence, and now we have a comprehensive economic cooperation partnership with Mauritius. 2 important indexes that we would be discussing. The first is the hunger index. In 2017 it was released. Now under indexes, what is important is the parameters that have been taken into account and who has released that index. So this has been released by International Food Policy Research Institute, first thing. The next thing is, what are the components? So in this scale, if it is 0, it is the best, and if it is 100, it is the worst. So it works on an inverse basis. That's again important to note. The 4 components, which of the following is not a component of global hunger index, could be a direct question. So undernourishment, child wasting, child stunting and child mortality are some of the important parameters, the 4 important components considered under global hunger index. We are planning to establish, or a proposed plastic park has come up in Devgarh in Jharkhand region, and also along with that there is a Central Institute for Plastic Engineering and Technology that has been established in Devgarh. The next is, we are scrapping the export duty on sugar. In February 2018, we said we would double the import duties on sugar. So both of those things are very, very important and crucial to consider the fact that we are trying to protect our sugarcane industries or sugar industries in India. So first of all, we are scrapping the export duty, so exports would become more easier, and we are doubling the import duty, so that means we are not promoting the import of sugar into India. So both of those are aimed to boost the sugar industry production or the sugar production in India. The next is, similar to the sugar, you have anti-dumping duty that has been imposed on ufloxacin, which is an antibiotic which is mainly coming from China or imported from China, and the group to which this antibiotic belongs is again very, very important. So it belongs to the fluoroquinones. So the group of antibiotics under which ufloxacin lies is again important. Now under urban governance, that has been taken up by a Bangalore based NGA, that was Jannagraha. So under this organization, Pune has topped the country in the terms of urban governance in India for high quality infrastructure, and so far 23 cities have been considered and nearly 89 questions or parameters have been taken into account. We have already talked about the global hunger index. The next important index is energy transition index. India has ranked 78th on the energy transition index. Now who has given this index is again important, so it's World Economic Forum. And what was the name of the report? So the name of the report was Fostering Effective Energy Transition. So that's again very, very important to know here. Now the countries who have ranked top are Sweden and Norway. BRICS nations under ETI, the energy transition index, include Brazil, Russia and China. There have been significant amendments that have been done to the FDI policy in India, that have talked about 49% FDI in airlines. Then we have talked about 100% FDI under automatic rule for single brand retail trading, and permitting this single brand retail trading entity for incremental sourcing of goods from India. So those are some of the major things or steps that have taken under the FDI. Now GST, there has been a 50% increment or registration in the indirect taxpayers, that has been a significant amount. So we can say the idea of GST has proved to be successful as the number of registrants have increased, or we can say the compliance is getting better for GST. The 5 best states who are performing most of the exports from India are Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. Again, very important, there could be a direct question on this. The next important thing is the Model Shop and Establishment Act has been released, and what we have done is we have simplified the labour laws. So we have grouped the labour laws into 4 to 5 labour codes which are on a functional basis. Besides that, the maternity leave has been increased from 12 weeks to 26 weeks. We are also simplifying the central labour laws that have come up. So these are the codes on which we are working. Those are wages, industrial relations, social security, occupational safety and health and working conditions. Very important is BND 4201, and this is Bharatiya Nirdeshak Dravya. This is the India's first highest or purest quality of gold standard that has been released. It talks about 99.99% pure gold that would be released. Has been released by IGM, the Indian Government Mint, which is a unit of the Security, Printing and Minting Corporation of India. So IGM has released it, and what is BND 4201 could be again a very direct question for you. Digital transactions have stepped up. We are working towards BHIM app, we are working towards UPI payments, Aadhaar enabled payment systems. We have discussed all these digital transactions in our classes on Yojana. So just go back to the class on Yojana again to understand this in detail. Again, in the rural areas with the increasing BharatNet or the optic fiber networking, internet has become easy, and therefore digital transactions are being boosted even in the rural areas. This topic is important for your international relations as well. So relations between India and Iran are again important. So between India and Iran, what we are trying to do is, you have the establishment or refurbishment of the Chabar port, which is the Shahid Beheshti port, and the relations between India and Iran based on the establishment or opening of the Chabar port is again important for your international relations, as I said. The next is virtual currency. We have taken a comprehensive class on cryptocurrencies and bitcoins. So Venezuela has released a new virtual currency in the name of Petro, and this Petro is a real threat to United States. They have started or created a blockchain based observatory for creation of this Petro currency by themselves. So that's again important to understand. The next is, we have the establishment of 15th Finance Commission that has taken place. This Finance Commission basically talks about allocation of financial resources between center, state and the local bodies. The 14th Finance Commission was led by Reddy and was for the duration of 2015 to 2020. This has been led by Chairman N.K. Singh, and it's again important. So Finance Commission has been established. Anti-avoidance rule is important. So under anti-avoidance rule, there are two anti-avoidance rules, the GAR and the SAR. So GAR talks about general anti-avoidance and SAR talks about specific anti-avoidance. So we say tax avoidance is legal, but the large scale revenue losses can occur, and for that we need to take into account the anti-avoidance rules. The next is PFMS, that is Public Finance Management System. The core idea of Public Finance Management System is all the benefits should reach to the last mile or the person who is intended for it. To check that, you have the PFMS that has been established by the center, and this is again very important and would be led by the central monitoring system, the CP grams that we say. The next is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, headquartered in London. The Cabinet of India has approved India's membership to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and this is indeed a big jump for India. The two important institutions which are part of it are European Union and European Investment Banks, and to become a member we require a minimum of 100 shares for the membership. Bank recapitalization we have already talked about in our January Yojana on banking reforms. So the key idea here is we are trying to understand how the banks are, if they are into losses, there is need to flush in money into the banks, and for that you have the recapitalization and the Indradhanush plan that was released to infuse the capital into the banking system, and this recapitalization would strengthen the existing banking structure. ETF, now what is a difference between ETF and a mutual fund? ETFs are basically traded on the stock exchange platform, unlike the mutual funds, and these ETF, the ETF that has been released by government recently is named as Bharat 22. It has an amount of nearly 8,000 crores and it would be managed by ICICI Prudential. So this is again important, who would manage this ETF? So that's again very important question. Now all the peer-to-peer lending firms have been treated as non-banking financial companies, and these have been regulated by RBI. So that's again important, how RBI has come into regulation of these. The infant mortality rate has decreased. There has been a 3-point decline for 2017 for the infant mortality rate. That is a good standard or a good strike for India in terms of health parameters. Very exceptionally important topic is D-SIBs, that is domestic systematically important banks. It was established in 2015. SBI was the first bank, and then you had ICICI. HDFC, those two were done in 2016. HDFC was included recently in 2017, and it is the second private bank that has come under the domestic systematically important banks. This has been termed as too big to fail. That means these banks are so important that government are protecting these banks in terms that they should not fail, and if they fail there would be a condition as that happened in America. So that needs to be checked in, and for that you have the D-SIBs that have been declared, 3 banks that are important, and HDFC has been recently added. Hyperloop has been planned in Andhra Pradesh between Amravati and Vijayawada. It's important because it's important for the terms of economic relations between the two regions. The next is Maharatna. So under the levels of government companies, we talk about Mini Ratna, Navratna and Maharatna. So far we had 7 Maharatna, and Bharat Petroleum is now again a Maharatna. That Bharat Petroleum has now been declared a Maharatna. What are the characteristics to match to a Maharatna company? The company should be a Navratna company for the first stake. The next is, it should be listed in the Navratna Navratna companies. Then you have average turnaround of nearly 25,000 for last 3 years. Net worth of nearly 15,000 crores for last 3 years, and net profit of nearly 5,000 crores for last 3 years. If these criteria match, the company would be shifted from Navratna to Maharatna, and that's again very important. So Bharat Petroleum is now a Maharatna company. Under Navratna companies, you have 9 defense public sector undertakings which are important, and we have the list. Those would be available in the handouts, so you can simply refer those. The next important thing is the diesel consignment that has been sent to Myanmar. That's for the first time India has sent a diesel consignment to Myanmar. So far it was only sent to Bangladesh, and it would be sent from Numaligarh refinery to Myanmar, and this diesel would be a high speed diesel that would be supplied. And when we talk about diesel, we talk about cetane numbers. Similar to that, when we talk about gasoline, we talk about octane numbers. So these octane numbers, the octane number or the octane ranking could be increased by adding the anti-knocking agents. So when I say anti-knocking agent, so far lead was used as an anti-knocking agent, and now we are moving forward from lead because lead is considered hazardous to health. So the next we have included is the 2,2,4-trimethyl pentane, which has become important anti-knocking agent. Now that's for the octane number. When we talk about cetane numbers, we say cetane numbers talk about light distillate diesel oils. So cetane number is ranked for only light distillate diesel oils. If it is a heavy distillate diesel oil, you have the ranking as CCAI and CII. So CII is calculated ignition index and CCAI is calculated carbon aromaticity index. So these two index are included for high distillate diesel. So that's again important, cetane number. The next is SAIL. Now SAIL is moving up with a new idea of Chalo Gaon ki or Gaon ki or. That means it's trying to sell its steel into the rural areas. The idea is to bring in more infrastructure and more development into the rural areas, and again to boost the sale. So sales, not this sale. So it's working forward to move or boost its sales, and SAIL has been working in this direction. The next is a very important terminology, futures and options. So what is the difference between future and option? Option, from the name itself, is clear. So for like an MCQ question, you have options or choices. Similarly, options means you have right to buy or sell. Now make sure you are understanding clearly. Options say it's right. However, under future we say it's obligation. So that's something that is definite. So futures, you have an obligation to buy and sell at a specific future date that has been given. Therefore, I can say futures are more risky because I have already specified the date and I don't know the price that would be on that day. So futures are more risky, and however there is no upfront cost for the futures, but for the options you have to pay the premiums. Now understanding this, we would start with the future contracts. So there are important trading exchange in India. First is the MCX and the next is NCDEX. MCX is the biggest commodity exchange trading in India. The second important is NDCEX. Now MCX is the multi-commodity exchange of India Limited. Now it launched the first brass contracts, future contracts, and this is the first time the contracts has been done for a non-ferrous item. Similarly, you have the first commodity options that have come up for the gold. So future options for brass by MCX, commodity options basically, not futures, for gold by MCX. So that's again important. Now the next important thing is the NCDEX. So NCDEX, which is the second important commodity trading platform in India, has released Gaur seed as the first agri commodity option. Again, Gaur seed has come up as an option, not a future. So that's again important to remember. And NCDEX is basically the National Commodity and Derivatives Exchange Limited in India. Now this Gaur seed, you have nearly more than 15 lakhs farmers who are engaged with the Gaur seed production, and you have Gaur gum that is being extracted from these Gaur seeds. The next important is ICEX. So ICEX is the next important commodity exchange in India. It's the Indian Commodities Exchange, and it would be the first commodity futures that would be released for diamond. So ICEX would release the first commodities futures, not options, futures for diamond. And then you have another institution which is NMCE. So together these ICEX and NMCE are trying to merge together, and once merged they would become the third largest stock trading exchange, a commodity trading exchange in India after MCX and NCDEX. So the next important thing is poll bonds. Now the election or the electoral party, the election party basically requires funds. To provide funds to the election party, you have the poll bonds that have been released. The most important thing to note here is this poll bond would not accept money in cash. It would be only through a check or a digital payment that the monies would be accepted into the poll bonds, and to put in money, it should be in the multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh or 1 crore. It would bring in more transparency into the political parties and the money that is going into the political funding. Also for this, you would have to fulfill the KYC norms. The next is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. Very, very important. We have covered a detailed lecture on the Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Board of India and the regulations that have been passed. So cover that thoroughly, don't leave it. The next important is secure funds for Bangalore Metro Rail project have been released, and this has been done by the European Investment Banks. So European Investment Bank has put in money for the Bangalore Metro Rail project. So that's again important. Now, UNACTED has given an interesting finding. It has said that when there was a financial crisis in 2008, the world global growth rate was 3.2%, and right now it's 2.6, which is far less than that. So that means we are working towards a future financial crisis that could come up, and therefore UNACTED has also said that China and India could not be the global growth poles, because India's growth has slowed down in 2017 and the same has happened for China. The next is the foreign exchange reserves have crossed 400 billion mark, $400 billion in India. And what are the parameters that have been included, or the components of the foreign exchange reserves in India? So those are foreign currency assets, the special drawing rights, the gold, and the RBI's reserve position with the IMF or the International Monetary Fund. So all these four determine the foreign exchange reserves in India. The next is the Dairy Processing and the Infrastructure Development Fund has been approved in India. That has come up in the recent budget, and it's again important. The idea is to increase the production of milk. The next is between India and Japan, we are signing a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding for silk. Now this would be between the Central Silk Board of India and the National Institute of Agro-Biological Sciences, Japan. So the institution of Japan that would be supporting India is again important. So make sure you have covered that thoroughly. And the next is Alang Sosia Shipyard. Now Alang lies in Bhavnagar district in Gujarat. It is one of the major ship breaking industries, and the idea is to bring the shipyard or the ship breaking industry at par with the international safety levels. For that, the Japan International Cooperation Agency has done a deal of loan nearly $76 million. Along with that, Gujarat government would be spending $25 million and Ministry of Shipping would be sharing $10 million for the basically revamping of the Alang shipyard. The next is Northeast Venture Fund for Young Startups. This is again very important. You have a Northeast Development Fund that has been established for the young startups, and this is a ISO 9001. When we say ISO 9001, it talks about quality control. ISO 14001 talks about environment. ISO 50001 talks about energy. ISO 27001 talks about information services or securities. So these ISO rankings are important, and we would be covering a separate lecture on ISO standards. So make sure you are aware of those, and there could be one or two direct questions on those. Pushpendra has a question on blockchain technology. So we have already covered that in the video. We have the link here. You can just refer that. The next is Tapi gas pipeline. Very important to note, you should not confuse it with the Tapi river that flows in India. This Tapi is the name of the four countries, the initials, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. It's basically a relation between India and Turkmenistan, where you would have a gas pipeline that would cross Afghanistan and Pakistan, and this would be one of the major steps that have been done as a relation between India and Turkmenistan. Again, a very important part of your international relations. With this, we cover the first part of economics. We will be continuing the second part of economics on Friday. So stay tuned at 11 AM on Friday for our second lecture on economics. For any doubts, leave those as comment below the video. We will be happy to resolve those. Have a